In 1987, 12 nuns vanished from Mercy of the Cross Convent without a trace, leaving behind half-prepared breakfasts, prayer books, and personal belongings undisturbed. Authorities eventually settled on the explanation that a tuberculosis outbreak had necessitated an emergency medical evacuation, despite hospitals having no record of ever receiving the sisters. The case went cold for 7 years until a weathered logbook appeared at a bankruptcy auction, its mileage calculations and cryptic notations revealing a government conspiracy more sinister than anyone had imagined. One that led investigators to an abandoned sanatorium and 12 shallow graves hidden behind its crumbling walls. Before we uncover the shocking truth behind one of America's most baffling disappearances, I want to thank you for joining us on Last Seen Stories. If you're fascinated by mysteries like this one, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments below, along with any cases you'd like us to cover in the future. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. Now, let's journey back to 1987 and discover what really happened to the nuns of Mercy of the Cross Convent. St. Catherine Valley stretches across 30 miles of dense forest and rolling hills in northern Minnesota, a place where winter arrives early and stays late. The kind of place where summer visitors marvel at the pristine beauty, while locals respect the deadly isolation that comes when snow blankets the single road connecting them to the outside world. The valley had been home to the Mercy of the Cross Convent since 1892, when the original stone structure was built by Swedish immigrants seeking divine protection from the harsh elements. By 1987, the convent stood as an imposing 3-story structure of weathered gray stone, its Gothic windows peering out from the edge of a dense pine forest like vigilant sentinels. A wrought iron fence surrounded the 5-acre property, its gate perpetually open, despite the nuns' general wariness of outsiders. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. The nearest town, St. Catherine itself, a full 7 miles down a winding dirt road that became impassable during the worst winter storms. Inside, the convent was a study in austere beauty. Wooden floors polished by generations of devoted hands gleamed in the light that filtered through stained glass windows. The chapel occupied the entire east wing, its simple wooden pews facing an altar adorned only with a hand-carved crucifix and 12 brass candlesticks, 1 for each sister. The living quarters were Spartan but comfortable, each nun's cell containing a narrow bed, a small desk, and personal items that reflected their individual characters despite their communal lifestyle. The convent was home to 12 women of varying ages and backgrounds, bound together by faith and purpose. Mother Superior Victoria Drake ruled their small domain with the precision and discipline she'd learned during her years as a military nurse in Korea. At 65, her spine remained straight as a ramrod, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features. The younger sisters sometimes joked, very quietly, that God himself wouldn't dare be late to one of Mother Victoria's morning prayers. Sister Agnes McCoy had been at the convent longer than anyone except Mother Victoria. At 52, she was the convent's master gardener, her gnarled hands equally skilled at coaxing life from the rocky Minnesota soil and crafting the herbal remedies that locals sometimes sought, despite their mistrust of the strange women on the hill. Her weather journals were legendary for their accuracy, often predicting storms before the forecasters in Minneapolis caught wind of them. Sister Teresa Novak had joined the order 12 years earlier, abandoning a promising career in a biochemistry accident after the death of her fiancé. At 38, she maintained the convent's small but impressively stocked library and occasionally corresponded with former colleagues about advances in her field. The silver crucifix she wore contained a tiny vial of her fiancé's ashes, a secret known only to Mother Victoria, who had allowed this one deviation from the rules. The youngest was Sister Lucia Rodriguez, only 29 and still uncertain about her calling. She had arrived from Arizona just 18 months earlier, her vibrant personality sometimes at odds with the quiet routine of convent life. She maintained regular correspondence with her large family, sending letters filled with observations about the changing seasons and gentle humor about adjusting to the northern climate. Her small wooden flute often echoed through the stone halls during permitted recreation hours, playing melodies from her childhood. Life at Mercy of the Cross followed a rhythm as predictable as the seasons. The bell in the small tower rang at 4:30 each morning, calling the sisters to prayer. Breakfast was served at 6 a.m., always in silence except on Sundays and holy days. Work duties filled the morning hours: gardening, cleaning, correspondence, and community service at the St. Catherine Medical Clinic or the county's only elementary school. Midday prayers were followed by a simple lunch, then more work or study until evening prayers at 5 and dinner at 6. By 9 o'clock, the convent was dark and silent except for the soft murmur of private devotions behind closed doors. The sisters' relationship with the town of St. Catherine was complicated by decades of mutual suspicion. The townspeople respected the nuns' medical knowledge and teaching skills, but whispered about their isolation and strange customs. The sisters, for their part, fulfilled their community obligations while maintaining a careful distance from the secular world beyond their gates. Only Father Michael Collins, who drove from St. Catherine every Wednesday to hear confessions and conduct Mass, served as a regular bridge between these two worlds. It was Father Collins who first noticed something was terribly wrong on that crisp October morning in 1987.
Dawn broke clear and cold over St. Catherine Valley on October 17, 1987, the kind of morning where frost etched delicate patterns on fallen leaves and breath hung visible in the air. Father Michael Collins followed his usual routine, rising early to prepare for his weekly visit to the convent. At 57, he had served the parish of St. Catherine for nearly 2 decades and knew the rhythms of the sisters' lives as well as he knew his own. His ancient blue Ford pickup coughed and sputtered up the winding road as the sun crested the eastern hills, bathing the valley in golden light. Father Collins hummed along to a Johnny Cash song on the radio, his mind already rehearsing the sermon he would deliver on Sunday. The convent came into view just after 7:30, its stone walls glowing amber in the morning light. The first thing that struck him as odd was the silence. Saturdays at this hour usually meant Sister Agnes would be in the garden, gathering the last of the season's herbs before the first hard freeze. The front door should have been propped open to air out the entrance hall, as was Mother Victoria's unvarying custom during morning chores. Instead, the heavy wooden door remained closed, and the garden stood empty, tools neatly arranged beside beds of vegetables ready for harvest. "Hello?" Father Collins called as he knocked on the door. No response came from within. He tried the handle and found it unlocked, not unusual, as the convent rarely secured its doors during daylight hours. "Sisters? Mother Victoria." The entrance hall was dim, illuminated only by what little sunlight filtered through the stained glass transom above the door. Father Collins felt an unfamiliar chill that had nothing to do with the October morning. The silence was absolute, lacking even the distant sounds of activity that typically echoed through the stone corridors. "Is anyone here?" he called again, his voice sounding strangely muffled. He moved toward the dining hall where breakfast should have been underway. The long oak table was set with 12 places. Simple white plates, steel cutlery, and ceramic mugs positioned with Mother Victoria's characteristic precision. A pot of porridge sat on the cast-iron stove, cold and congealed. A kettle had boiled dry, its bottom scorched black. Father Collins' unease deepened as he moved through the first floor. The chapel door stood open, revealing empty pews and unlit handles. Prayer books lay open on several seats, as if their readers had been called away suddenly. In the kitchen, a knife rested on a cutting board beside half-sliced bread. A jar of Sister Agnes's blackberry preserve stood open, its spoon stuck in the thick purple contents. His pace quickened as he climbed the stairs to the living quarters. "Sisters?" he called again, louder now. "Is anyone here? Mother Victoria." Each cell door stood open, revealing beds made with military precision, except for Sister Lucia's, which was slightly rumpled, as if someone had sat on it after it was made. Personal items remained in place. Sister Teresa's collection of scientific journals, Sister Agnes's pressed flower specimens, Mother Victoria's father's pocket watch on her nightstand. Only the sisters themselves were missing. The convent's only telephone was located in Mother Victoria's office, a concession to modernity she had accepted reluctantly and used sparingly. Father Collins' hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number for the St. Catherine Sheriff's Office. "Sheriff Wilson, it's Father Collins. Something's happened at the convent. The sisters, all of them, they're gone." Sheriff Thomas Wilson and Deputy Dana Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, their cruiser kicking up dust as it came to an abrupt stop beside Father Collins' pickup. Wilson was a bear of a man, with 30 years of law enforcement experience etched into the lines of his weathered face. At 54, he had seen everything from deadly blizzards to domestic disputes. But the expression on Father Collins' face when he met them in the driveway suggested something beyond the ordinary.
"They wouldn't just leave, Tom," the priest said, using the sheriff's first name as he had since they were boys together in St. Catherine. "Not without telling someone, not without taking their personal things." "Let's not jump to conclusions, Mike," Wilson replied, but his expression betrayed his concern. "Dana, you take the grounds. I'll go through the building with Father Collins." Deputy Martinez, 32 and the department's newest member, nodded and began a methodical examination of the convent grounds. She started with the garden, noting the tools left ready for use, then moved to the small orchard where late apples still hung on gnarled trees. The convent's only vehicle, a 1979 Dodge van used for trips to town, sat in the small garage, its keys hanging on their usual hook just inside the door. Inside, Sheriff Wilson conducted his own systematic search. He noted the interrupted breakfast preparations, the abandoned prayer books, the personal items left behind. Nothing suggested violence or struggle. No overturned furniture, no broken objects, no signs of forced entry. It was as if the sisters had simply evaporated in the middle of their morning routine. "Mike, when's the last time you spoke with any of them?" Wilson asked, as they stood in Mother Victoria's austere office. "Wednesday, for confessions and Mass. Everything was normal. Sister Lucia mentioned feeling a bit under the weather, a cold, she thought, but otherwise nothing unusual." Wilson nodded, making notes in a small pad.
And they had no plans to travel, no retreat or meeting with the diocese? Nothing. Mother Victoria would have told me. A knock at the door interrupted them. Deputy Martinez entered, her expression troubled. "Sheriff, you need to see this." She led them to a clearing at the edge of the property where the dirt road widened to allow deliveries. "Look at these tracks," she said, pointing to multiple tire impressions in the soft ground. "Heavy vehicles. At least 3, maybe 4. And they're fresh, last night or early this morning." Wilson crouched to examine the tracks. "Too wide for cars, maybe trucks or ambulances," Martinez finished. "And there's something else." She held up a small notebook bound in faded red leather. "I found this under a bush near the tracks. It's Sister Lucia's diary." Wilson carefully opened the notebook, turning to the most recent entry, dated October 16. "Strange men in suits came again today. 3rd time this week. They spoke with Mother Victoria for over an hour. She came out looking pale. When I asked, she said it was diocesan business, but Bishop Hannigan was at the conference in Rome last month. He mentioned nothing about sending representatives. Something isn't right." "3rd time this week?" Father Collins murmured. "I was here Wednesday. I didn't see any visitors." "They must have come after you left," Wilson said, pocketing the diary. "Let's check with—" He was interrupted by the crackle of the radio on his belt. "Sheriff, you there?" came the voice of Florence, the dispatcher operator. "Go ahead, Flo." "Got Arnold Gustafson on the line. Says he saw something strange this morning around 5 o'clock. Multiple ambulances heading up toward the convent. Says they had medevac written on the sides." Wilson and Father Collins exchanged troubled glances. "Tell Arnold I'll be by to talk to him. And Flo, get me the regional health department on the line. I want to know if they authorized any medical transport from the convent." By noon, the convent had been thoroughly searched, revealing nothing but more questions. Arnold Gustafson, whose farm stood near the valley's entrance, confirmed seeing 3 white ambulances with medevac private transport logos heading toward the convent before dawn. He had thought little of it until hearing about the missing nuns. "Lights were flashing, but no sirens," the old farmer reported, scratching his gray stubbled chin. "Thought maybe one of the sisters took ill. They keep to themselves so much. Hard to know what goes on up there."
More puzzling was the response from the Minnesota Department of Health. They confirmed authorizing an emergency medical evacuation from Mercy of the Cross Convent at 4:45 that morning, following reports of a potential tuberculosis outbreak. "TB?" Father Collins exclaimed when Wilson relayed this information. "That's impossible. I was just there Wednesday. No one was sick." "Someone reported it," Wilson replied, frowning at his notes. "Order came through official channels. Medevac Transport was contracted to relocate all 12 sisters to isolation wards at 3 different hospitals." Deputy Martinez, who had been making calls from the cruiser, approached with new information. "I've checked with every hospital within a 100-mile radius," she reported. "None of them received any patients from the convent. Not yesterday, not this morning, not ever." Sheriff Wilson's face hardened. "Get me everything you can on medevac transport, and call the FBI. This just went beyond missing persons." The disappearance of 12 nuns from Mercy of the Cross Convent quickly escalated from a local mystery to a regional sensation. By Monday, FBI agents had established a command center in the St. Catherine Town Hall. Satellite trucks from Minneapolis news stations crowded the small village square, and volunteers from 3 counties had joined the search efforts. Sophia Bennett, then a rookie reporter for the St. Catherine Valley Gazette, arrived at the convent on Sunday morning. At 26, she had been with the paper less than a year, covering town council meetings and local events with a determined thoroughness that had earned her editors grudging respect. But this story was different. This was personal. "I need to be on this, Frank," she had insisted to her editor. "Sister Constance is my aunt." Frank had hesitated, then nodded. "Just remember, you're a reporter first. Keep your emotions in check." That proved easier said than done as Sophia stood in her aunt's cell, staring at the familiar silver-framed photograph of their family on the simple wooden desk. It showed Sophia at 10, sitting between her father and Aunt Constance at the lake cabin where they had spent every summer until her aunt entered the convent. Sophia's throat tightened. She had last visited 2 months ago, bringing books and the special dark chocolate Sister Constance loved but would never request. "Miss Bennet?" Sophia turned to find an FBI agent in the doorway, a tall woman with short blonde hair and alert eyes. "I'm Agent Diane Fisher. I understand you're related to one of the missing women." "Sister Constance is my father's sister. Has there been any progress?" Fisher's expression remained neutral. "We're pursuing several leads. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your aunt, if you don't mind." The several leads proved disappointingly thin. Medevac Transport was a legitimate medical evacuation company based in Minneapolis, with contracts throughout the Midwest. Their staff uniformly confirmed the tuberculosis emergency, describing how they transported 12 nuns to hospitals in Minneapolis, Duluth, and Rochester for immediate treatment and isolation. "We followed standard protocols for infectious disease transport," insisted Operations Director Gerald Manning when interviewed by both FBI agents and reporters. "All patients were transferred to hospital staff upon arrival. What happened after that is not our responsibility." Yet every hospital denied receiving the patients. Security footage, staff interviews, intake records all confirmed the Sisters of Mercy of the Cross had never arrived at any medical facility. Background checks on the nuns revealed nothing unusual. Most had joined the order decades ago, maintaining minimal contact with the outside world. None had criminal records, political affiliations, or financial assets beyond what the convent itself owned, which rounded to the property, the van, and a modest bank account that remained untouched. Sheriff Wilson led search teams through the dense forest surrounding the convent, looking for any sign the sisters might have fled on foot. Divers examined the small lake a mile from the property. Cadaver dogs sniffed every inch of the 5-acre grounds. Nothing. The investigation began generating more questions than answers. A night nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Minneapolis reported seeing ambulances with Medevac logos in the parking lot on October 17, but security cameras showed no such vehicles. A gas station attendant in Cloquet recalled serving coffee to men in Medevac uniforms who acted nervous but couldn't recall any details about their appearance or vehicles. Most disturbing was the abrupt resignation of Miles Hargrove, the Medevac driver assigned to the convent transport. 3 days after the disappearance, he cleaned out his locker, sold his house to a cash buyer, and reportedly moved to Alaska, leaving no forwarding address. "It doesn't make sense," Sophia said to Sheriff Wilson as they sat in his office, reviewing what little evidence they had. "Why fake a tuberculosis outbreak? Why make it look like a medical evacuation?" "Legitimacy," Wilson replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "Nobody questions ambulances. Nobody stops them. It was the perfect cover for removing 12 women quickly and quietly." "But why? The sisters had nothing of value. They weren't witnesses to anything. They just prayed and gardened and taught children." Wilson had no answer. Neither did the FBI, whose agents began spending more time interviewing the sisters' distant relatives than searching for new leads. By December, the investigation had hit one dead end after another. The visitor logbook from the convent, which might have revealed who had visited in the days before the disappearance, was found to be missing several pages, specifically those covering the 2 weeks prior to October 17. Anonymous calls to the sheriff's office warned them to stop looking,
but call traces led nowhere. Then came the suicide. On December 12th, Gerald Manning, the operations director of Medevac, was found dead in his garage, his car running, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the passenger seat. His death was ruled a suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. The note he left mentioned only "mistakes I can't live with" and instructions for his funeral. Winter descended on St. Catherine Valley with a vengeance, burying the convent under 4 feet of snow and effectively halting ground searches until spring. By February, the FBI had scaled back their involvement, citing lack of evidence and more pressing cases. The media trucks departed, seeking fresher tragedies. Only Sophia Bennett continued visiting the convent regularly, sometimes sitting in the chapel for hours, sometimes walking the silent corridors as if her footsteps might somehow echo back some hint of what had happened. She collected every scrap of information, interviewed anyone remotely connected to the case, and refused to let the story die, even as her editor gently suggested it was time to move on. "They're still out there," she insisted. "Someone knows something." But as weeks turned to months, and months to years, even Sophia began to wonder if the truth would ever be known. 7 years passed. The Mercy of the Cross Convent stood empty on its hilltop, a stone monument to unanswered questions. The diocese had considered selling the property, but faced unexpected community resistance. Instead, they maintained it minimally, enough to keep the roof from leaking and vandals at bay. Local legend transformed it from a place of prayer to a haunted landmark, where teenagers dared each other to spend the night and claimed to hear phantom bells or ghostly singing. St. Catherine Valley itself had changed little. The same families farmed the same land. The same businesses lined the main street. But a certain wariness had settled over the community, a collective scar from the wound of the unsolved mystery. Sophia Bennett had risen from rookie reporter to editor of the Gazette. Her tenacious coverage of the convent disappearance earned her regional awards and job offers from larger papers in Minneapolis and Chicago. She declined them all, unwilling to leave the place where the mystery began. On the anniversary of the disappearance each year, she published a detailed account of the case, including any new information, though that had dwindled to almost nothing by the 5th year.
Sheriff Thomas Wilson had retired in 1992, his health undermined by the stress of the unsolved case and his own sense of failure. He still lived in St. Catherine, spending most days fishing or woodworking in his garage. But each evening he reviewed his personal copies of the case files, searching for something he might have missed. The official explanation had hardened into a kind of defensive certainty. The nuns had been legitimately evacuated due to health concerns and had subsequently chosen to relocate and remain anonymous, perhaps joining other convents individually. This theory ignored dozens of inconsistencies, but offered a convenient closure that most officials embraced. Sophia maintained her wall of evidence in both her office and her home, adding to it whenever something even tangentially related emerged. Her aunt's silver-framed family photograph sat on her desk, a daily reminder of promises unkept. It was into this stasis that Connor Riley arrived in early October 1994. A former Army medic who had served in Desert Storm, Riley had returned to civilian life with a pronounced limp and an eye for valuable oddities. He made a modest living as an estate liquidator, purchasing the contents of foreclosed properties and bankrupt businesses, then reselling items of interest. On October 3rd, he attended the final bankruptcy auction of Med-Evac Transport, which had ceased operations in 1992 following years of declining business and legal troubles. Among the lots of office furniture and outdated medical equipment, Riley spotted a collection of logbooks and company records deemed worthless by other bidders. He purchased the entire lot for $20.
Later that evening, sorting through his acquisition in his Minneapolis apartment, Riley discovered the logbook labeled Driver Records 1987 Hargrove M. The name seemed vaguely familiar, and as he flipped through the meticulously maintained records, he remembered the news stories about the missing nuns and the driver who had vanished. October 17, 1987, caught his attention immediately. The entry detailed a pre-dawn medical evacuation from MCC, presumably Mercy of the Cross Convent, to SMH, DMC, and RMH, likely St. Mary's Hospital, Duluth Medical Center, and Rochester Methodist Hospital. But it was the mileage log that made Riley frown. The round trip from the Med-Evac garage to the convent and then to Minneapolis should have been approximately 160 miles. To include Duluth and Rochester would add several hundred more, yet Hargrove had logged exactly 356 miles for the entire operation, an impossible figure for the official route. Riley spent hours poring over the logbook, noting other discrepancies. Fuel receipts, stapled to the pages, showed purchases at stations nowhere near the supposed destinations. Small notations in the margins included cryptic abbreviations, SS Intake and Section 12 Transfer Complete. After searching through his box of old newspapers, Riley found a feature article on the 7th anniversary of the disappearance, written by Sophia Bennett. The next morning, he called the Gazette. "Miss Bennett, my name is Connor Riley. I think I found something about your missing nuns." The logbook lay open on Sophia's desk, its pages illuminated by her desk lamp as evening shadows lengthened across her office. Sheriff Wilson, retired now but still sharp-eyed, stood beside her, his reading glasses perched on his nose as they examined Miles Hargrove's meticulous records. "He was thorough, I'll give him that," Wilson murmured. "Mileage down to the 10th, fuel to the penny, times to the minute." "Too thorough," Sophia replied. "Look at the official record." She pointed to the typed form attached to the October 17th entry. It says they transported 4 nuns to St. Mary's Hospital in Minneapolis, 4 to Duluth Medical Center, and 4 to Rochester Methodist Hospital. Total round-trip mileage, 642 miles. But his handwritten log shows 356 miles total. And these fuel receipts, this one's from a station in Pine County, nowhere near the route to any of those hospitals. Connor Riley, who had driven to St. Catherine to deliver the logbook personally, nodded. "I mapped it out. There's no way they could have gone to all 3 hospitals with that mileage. They went somewhere else." Sophia spread a road map across her desk, tracing the most likely route from Minneapolis to the convent. "If they picked up the nuns here," she said, marking the convent with a red pen, "and only drove 356 miles round trip, they couldn't have gone farther than about 170 miles from Minneapolis before turning around." Wilson studied the map, his finger tracing potential routes. North would make sense. Less traffic, fewer witnesses. Riley leaned in, pointing to the cryptic margin notes. "These abbreviations, SS Intake and Section 12 Transfer, they appear repeatedly. Could SS be a location?" "St. Sebastian's," Wilson said suddenly, his expression changing to one of recognition. "The old tuberculosis sanatorium up near the Canadian border. It was shut down in the 60s. You know it?" Sophia asked. Wilson nodded slowly. "My uncle was treated there in the 50s. Massive stone complex, very isolated. The state abandoned it when TB treatments improved. It's about 170 miles northwest of here." Sophia quickly measured the distance on the map. That would fit the mileage in Hargrove's logbook. A one-way trip there from the convent plus the drive from and back to Minneapolis would be almost exactly 356 miles. "But why take the nuns to an abandoned sanatorium?" Riley asked. "That's what we need to find out," Sophia replied, already reaching for her coat. "Sheriff, can you still drive those back roads?"
Wilson's weathered face broke into a grim smile. "Try and stop me." The journey to St. Sebastian's Sanatorium took nearly 4 hours, much of it on poorly maintained forest roads that had Wilson cursing under his breath as his old pickup bounced through potholes and ruts. They had left St. Catherine just after sunset, the October sky fading from purple to black as they drove northward. Sophia sat between Wilson and Riley, the logbook opened on her lap, a flashlight illuminating pages she had almost memorized during the drive. "Should be just ahead," Wilson said, as they rounded a curve in the narrow road. "Through those trees, there." The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a massive iron gate hanging askew from stone pillars. Beyond it, barely visible in the gloom, loomed the dark silhouette of St. Sebastian's Sanatorium. They parked beside the gate and continued on foot, flashlight beams playing across the overgrown path leading to the main building. The sanatorium was a sprawling 3-story structure of dark stone, its numerous windows like empty eye sockets staring down at them. Vines crawled up the walls, and saplings had taken root in the cracked steps leading to the main entrance. "It doesn't look like anyone's been here in decades," Riley murmured as they approached. But Wilson's flashlight had caught something else. Faint tire tracks in the muddy ground, partially obscured by fallen leaves but still discernible. Someone's been here. Recently. The massive front doors stood partially open, one hanging from a single hinge. They stepped into a cavernous entry hall, their flashlights revealing peeling paint, fallen ceiling tiles, and decades of dust and debris. Medical equipment lay abandoned, gurneys with rusted wheels, ancient X-ray machines, metal cabinets with doors hanging open. "We should split up," Sophia suggested. "Cover more ground." Wilson shook his head firmly. "Not a chance. We stay together. This place isn't stable, and we don't know what or who might be here." They moved methodically through the first floor, finding nothing but decay and abandonment. The second floor was much the same. Patient rooms with bare metal bed frames, offices with rotting desks, a dining hall with tables still set with institutional plates and cutlery, frozen in time from the day the facility closed.
It was on the 3rd floor that they found the first sign. In what had once been the administrative wing, a room that might have belonged to the medical director had been cleared of debris. The dust on the floor showed recent footprints, and a metal filing cabinet had been emptied, folders scattered across the floor. "Someone was looking for records," Sophia said, examining the folders. Most contained patient information dating back to the 1950s, but several had been emptied, their labels indicating they held administrative files. "There's something else," Riley called from the hallway. "Another stairwell, hidden behind this storage closet." The narrow stairs descended not to the 2nd floor but below ground level, into what appeared to be a previously sealed wing of the building. Unlike the decaying upper floors, this area showed signs of recent renovation. The walls had been freshly painted, electrical fixtures replaced, and the floor cleared of debris. "What is this place?" Sophia whispered, her flashlight revealing a long corridor with doors on either side. "Patient isolation," Wilson replied grimly. The most serious cases were kept underground, away from the general population. The first few rooms were empty, but the 5th door revealed something that made Sophia gasp. On a small table sat a pair of reading glasses with a distinctive blue beaded chain, the exact pair Sister Agnes had worn for as long as Sophia could remember. Beside them lay a weather journal, its final entry dated September 15, 1993, nearly 6 years after the disappearance. "They were here," Sophia breathed, her hands trembling as she lifted the journal. "They were alive, at least until last year." Room after room yielded similar evidence, small personal items belonging to the missing nuns, Sister Teresa's silver crucifix with its hidden compartment, Mother Victoria's father's pocket watch,
And most revealing of all, in what appeared to be the last room in the corridor, 3 pages torn from Sister Lucia's red leather diary. Riley held the flashlight while Sophia read the faded handwriting. April 3rd, 1989. They say we can never leave. Dr. K insists what we saw that night was a hallucination caused by gas leaks in the old chapel. But we know what we witnessed. Mother Victoria says we must be patient and pray. Sister Teresa believes the tests they're conducting are not about our health, but about our exposure. Whatever was buried beneath the convent, they're determined to keep it secret. November 10th, 1990. Sister Agnes isn't well. The treatments are taking a toll on us all, but she suffers most. They've moved her to the special ward. We're told it's for her comfort. But no one who goes there ever returns to the main ward. 5 gone now. 7 of us remain. February 22nd, 1993. I overheard the guards talking. Funding is being cut. The project is being decommissioned. I fear what that means for us. If no one knows we're here, no one will miss us when we're gone. If anyone finds this, please tell my family I... The entry ended abruptly, the pen stroke trailing off the page, as if Sister Lucia had been interrupted mid-sentence. "My God," Wilson whispered. "They weren't just relocated. They were imprisoned." "But why?" asked Riley. "What could they possibly have seen that was worth this?" Sophia's response died in her throat as her flashlight beam caught something beyond the last room, a heavy metal door standing ajar leading outside. They followed it to a small clearing behind the sanitarium where the undergrowth had been recently disturbed. A large rectangular area of soil, approximately 20 feet by 10, showed signs of having been dug up and reburied. "Tom, we need to call the FBI. Now." 3 days later, state police forensic teams confirmed what Sophia, Wilson, and Riley had already suspected. The disturbed earth behind St. Sebastian's Sanitarium contained the remains of 12 women, tentatively identified through dental records as the missing Sisters of Mercy of the Cross Convent. Preliminary findings suggested they had died within the past 18 months, though actual causes of death would require further examination. The investigation that followed uncovered fragments of a truth more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Classified documents reluctantly released under mounting pressure revealed that in 1986, a military contractor had used the abandoned land beneath the convent for unauthorized storage of experimental chemical compounds. When several containers began leaking in late 1987, the sisters had witnessed unusual phenomena that the government feared might be traced back to the secret facility. Rather than risk exposure, officials had orchestrated the fake medical evacuation and subsequent containment of the witnesses. Medivac Transport had been a government contractor specializing in sensitive relocations, their medical evacuation business merely a cover for more classified operations. The sisters had been held at St. Sebastian's for nearly 6 years, subjected to medical tests and isolation while authorities determined the extent of their exposure and monitored for long-term effects. When budget cuts threatened the project in 1993, the decision had been made to decommission the facility and eliminate the witnesses permanently. Miles Hargrove, the driver whose logbook had finally revealed the truth, was found living under an assumed name in Fairfax, Alaska. His testimony, given in exchange for immunity, provided the final pieces of the puzzle.
He had participated in the initial transport but had begun increasingly troubled by the operation, eventually stealing copies of records before fleeing. His conscience had never allowed him to come forward, but he had deliberately preserved the evidence that would eventually expose the truth. The ambulance logbook had finally led them to the Nuns of Mercy of the Cross Convent, but the true horror of why they were taken and what they knew that was worth killing for remained buried in classified files that wouldn't see the light of day for another 30 years.